It's the Metro on 1019 WDET FM. I'm Tia Graham.
And I'm Nick Austin. Today on the program, we'll look at the mayor's State of the City address, what it means for us here, and their plans with Malachi Barrett.
But first, on the Metro. These days, most TV shows and movies highlight coastal cities, particularly New York City. And that means the Midwest and Detroit doesn't get a lot of attention from Hollywood creators. That changed a little bit about a month ago, when BET Studios aired its first episode of the show Diarra From Detroit. In it, Diarra, a divorcing teacher who refuses to believe she's been ghosted by her Tinder date, goes in search of a man she went on a date with and finds herself in many unexpected places. The show is both a playful and serious take on the whodunit genre, and as the story unfolds, it captured so much of the personalities and experiences of Detroiters. To talk about the show now, we have the show's starring actor and creator here, Diarra Kilpatrick. Welcome to the Metro.
Good morning. Hey, Tia. Hey, Nick, right? Thank you for having me.
Yeah, that's right, Diarra. That's right.
Yeah, so, and I always ask before we get started, especially from people from the city of Detroit, what side are you from?
West Side.
West Side
all day.
Same. So this is great. In interviews, you've said already that you used to watch mystery shows as a kid, but you never saw Black women in those starring roles. A lot of us would love to have seen that representation growing up. Talk about what you learned from watching mystery shows as a kid and the ways in which you wanted Diarra from Detroit to be different.
Well, I think I learned it's a great way to tell a story. You know, it has automatic hooks that you want to get to the end. You want to keep watching. And as a storyteller, you know, that's always the goal. You want to retain your audience. And so on those kind of shows, it always felt like you locked in for the ride and wanted to go the full distance. And, you know, I just wanted to see that colored, like you said, with through a Black female lens and bring along the characters who would be, you know, in her world organically.
And, you know, I think about just online dating in general, app dating, Tinder, and all the things that you go through as a woman, especially using those apps. Talk about where you got the idea for this story in the first place.
Yeah, you know, it's kind of wish fulfillment. I think everybody who has been ghosted or stood up has wanted to become an investigator to a certain degree, you know, and sometimes you might get on the socials and see what they're up to or ask around or something. But my character takes it to a whole nother level. And even though it's a bit wild, you know, I don't think that's something that I would recommend people do in real life. There is a certain amount of wish fulfillment to see where this journey takes her in finding out exactly what happened to her missing date.
And Diarra, where do you get your love for storytelling, especially in the way that you're telling stories from the perspective of a Black woman, but perspective from a Detroiter as well? Where did you get that love from?
Man, my mom had me all over the city, you know, in any artistic endeavor she could find. So I started, you know, honestly, at the Detroit Public Library, the main branch, the children's librarian there, Callie. We were so close. You know, I was in junior grade books there on the weekends, mad that I had to go to the library on a Saturday. But, you know, that's where I began sort of my love affair with stories. And then we were always in the theater, whether it was, you know, Plowshares or the Detroit Rep or, you know, whatever was coming to town at the Masonic Temple. So it's something that's really been ingrained in me since I was really young, just that love of the arts and the love of storytelling, and particularly as a way to amplify the Black experience and as a means for us to sort of understand it and celebrate it.
And, you know, just thinking about growing up in the city, a Black city like Detroit, how did that shape you, especially when you're creating stories and you're just starting to grow into a storyteller and eventually lead yourself to BET? How did the city shape you?
Oh, man, in so many ways. I think, you know, honestly, it's a very resilient city. We're a very resilient people. I think we already know that, how tough, how strong we are. But one thing that Detroit gave me was not only, you know, that resiliency, but what makes it. And I think what really makes it is the heart that the people have, the sense of humor that the people have. You know, I challenge you to have gotten through a Black middle school and not been clowned, you know, not been teased, not had to come back with a one-liner, you know what I mean? And so I think that is really what makes us who we are. And also when there is, you know, sometimes a lack of funds or a lack of things, maybe even if people are suffering, there's also a greater level of compassion that comes out. So you see in the city, you hear about Mother Waddles, and you see, my mother was a teacher who would go above and beyond for her students, and she wasn't the only one, and so you really see that greater level of compassion, that greater level of feeling like we all belong to each other, and that's just straight up heart, and that's something that I honestly don't necessarily see, when I travel through this business in the character of other people. And so those are the things that, make me a Detroiter, is that I actually really care about other people. And I'm never above, a good joke. I can always make fun of myself, frankly, and try not to take myself too seriously.
Yeah, so Diarra, just thinking about some of the things that we've talked about, of course, the city of Detroit, the importance of community and just helping each other out. You talk about Detroit being a southern town in the north. What are the ways in which you made this show reflective of that city? I often think about just being from, having ancestors or families from Arkansas, Alabama, coming up here and just having that southern hospitality, walk in, speak to people, those type of things. So how did you show that in the show?
Yeah, I mean, there is, like you're saying, there's that connectivity where we're just 1 or 2 degrees away from everybody else. Even as the show has happened, so many people have been like, "Oh my God, my husband's from Detroit," or people who I knew connected to other people I know here. So there is that connectivity. Yeah. But I think there's also just the way that we take care of each other. I think even in the show, you see Diarra, she's going, the character, my name is Diarra and the character that I play is Diarra. So sometimes it can be confusing, but the character Diarra, she moves back home and she reconnects with some of her childhood friends. And even though there's a little bit of conflict there, they still ride for her. They don't really need to have all the information, but there's still a sense of, even if I don't completely mess with you, I'm not letting anybody else mess with you either. And I think that's that camaraderie that we have that represents how we have that sort of small town mentality, even though we're a big city.
And Diarra, I think about, you being on BET now, being on this large platform, showing the city of Detroit on this large platform, but also having a space to express yourself with storytelling. So how did you get to BET? How did that whole connection happen?
Well, I have been writing and acting in LA for a while. And so there were people within the industry who knew who I was. And one of them was Kenya Barris, who is a pretty prolific executive producer, writer himself. And we had just kind of bumped into each other at different Black events, NAACP Awards. It was a really hot Black party at Sundance that we ran into each other. And, he had been saying, like, we got to find a way to work together. And so when he left Netflix, he moved over to BET Studios, and he was bringing writers with him to develop shows exclusively for them. And so he called and said, I'm going over there. Do you want to come? And do you have any ideas to share? And I was like, I would like to come, and I do have some ideas. I had actually written the pitch for this show while I had a lot of downtime during the pandemic, while I was pregnant during the pandemic. Mm-hmm. So I had this idea, and they loved it. And the whole process kind of moved quickly from there.
Which is just amazing. The opportunity presented itself and you were ready. And that's just kind of how Detroiters are. We're ready when the opportunity presents itself, which is amazing to hear.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. So, just before we let you go, before we wrap everything up, just give us a quick, the pitch. Let us know where to watch it, how to watch it, and why we should watch Diarra from Detroit.
Oh, man, I would say go on. I know a lot of people actually canceled their Twitter or their X, but there are still some folks on there who are so invested in this show. They are cracking me up. I think that it's a show, like, a lot of times people just want to be entertained, they just want to have a good time. They want to hang out with characters that they would want to be on a road trip with, that they would want to hang out with. And I think that's what we have in this cast. So we have this really great mystery, a school teacher going through a divorce from, a character played by Morris Chestnut. So obviously she's not taking it well. And when she gets back out on the dating scene, the first guy that she meets ghosts her. And, she kind of gets in her Karen bag a little bit. She's like, I need answers. I can't take this lying down. I need to speak to the management. I'm sorry. And so she goes out trying to figure out what happened to him so she could get an apology or explanation. And she discovers that he might be at the heart of a very notorious cold case that she takes it upon herself to solve with her group of friends, many of which think she's crazy, some of which are just ride or die and ready to do this thing with her. And it takes us through the Detroit underworld. It's a lot of fun. It's very sexy. We have Felicia Rashad, like you've never seen her before, kind of carrying a pistol and talking a bunch of mess. But it's a fun, wild ride. You can find us on BET Plus, which you can get the BET app, or you can get it through Amazon. And our season finale actually will air next Thursday, and all 8 episodes will be up. You can binge watch them all at once if that's how you like to do it, and come check us out.
Yes, I am a binge watcher myself, so I plan on watching the rest of the episodes as soon as everything is uploaded and ready to go for a Sunday evening. So I'm looking forward to that. Diarra Kilpatrick, currently stars and is the creator of Diarra From Detroit. It's a production of BET Studios. Viewers can find episodes of the first episode of the show on Amazon Prime Video, BET Plus, and the Roku channel. Diarra, thank you so much for joining us this morning on The Metro.
Thank you so much.
It's the Metro on 1019 WDET, and coming up, we'll discuss a United Way summer program free and open to kids in the Tri-County area. It's the Metro on 1019 WDET. I'm Nick Austin.
And I'm Tia Graham. Now, I know there are parents that are listening, maybe grandparents, maybe a few guardians as well. Do you ever wonder what you're going to do with your kids over the summer? May is approaching, June, they'll be out, especially if you have kids who are not yet ready to be left alone at home, can't take care of themselves just yet. The United Way for Southeastern Michigan and the Balmer Group will provide open enrollment for Summer Discovery, a summer day camp for kids. The Balmer Group has invested $47 million to help students learn STEM learning loss over the summer months. The program is free and open to kids from Macomb, Oakland, and Wayne counties. And the program is tailored for students in grades K through 8 and community organizations. Jametta Lilly is here with us. She is the CEO of Detroit Parent Network. Jametta, thank you so much for joining us on the Metro.
It's a delight to be here.
Awesome. So, what is Summer Discovery? What's that program?
Oh, this is such an exciting, it's really unprecedented. 2 things that really happened this year. So one, both our legislators and our governor really understood how important out of school time is for opportunities for children to learn, to be able to, whether it's STEM, dance, music, how to be able to become a broadcaster or to produce films. And so not only did we have some funds happen at the legislative level, then the Balmer Group comes in full force and partnering with United Way. So now parents get ready. Both in Wayne County, Macomb, and Oakland, there are wonderful programs available with schools and with community-based organizations to provide 5 days a week fantastic summer learning experiences.
And when you look at the map, of course, we'll talk about where people can go find the map and see where those camps are located across Macomb, Wayne, and Oakland counties. You see there's so many that I thought about like transportation. I always think about that, how the kid's going to get there, how the parent's going to get the kids there. There are locations in so many different spaces across the 3 counties that I think the kids you all have made it easy for parents to find places for their kids to go this summer.
Yeah, I think that was really very masterful in the planning. I mean, many of us know if we had our way, we would have neighborhood schools. Yeah. And so there's a whole lot of dynamics why we don't, but it really is important, particularly for after-school programs and working parents, because when parents need to be able to pick up their child someplace that's in the trajectory of them getting at home. But that's one of the things that's exciting about the way this map looks. And by the way, it's going to be really easy for parents to be able to find these maps. You can go to their summer site if you go for summer discovery and then just click on to where. And an easy map comes up. You can put in your zip code. And voila, there are all types of choices that parents can make about, well, what is the best location, but not just the best location. You know, where is my really highly adaptive and ready to go and don't want to sit down and keep learning 8-year-old going to go? Well, let's find the best program. You can actually not only look at geography, but then click into to see, you know, what are the types of programs and services, and then pick up the phone, parents. I mean, this is the thing, we're all busy, but grab that telephone number, grab that email, and then get in contact with that school. Take a look at those photos. Put those photos in front of your children and get them excited about the summer of discovery. But parents should know that in many cases there are going to be these great programs nearby. All they have to do is put in your zip code, and those options will be able to pop up that they can begin to take a look at.
Jametta, I love that. I have tons of nieces and nephews, so I'm hoping that my sister's going to be listening in so she can definitely get my nieces and nephews into programs this year. But, you know, what role does the Parent Network, Detroit Parent Network, play with the Summer Discovery Program? Well, we're very, very pleased to have been asked to be part of the recruitment because Detroit Parent Network, we've been here 20 years. Educating, equipping, and empowering parents so parents can be champions for their children, but also for change. And so in that role, we talk to hundreds of parents. We've served thousands, and one of the things we try and do is help reinforce that parents are a child's first teacher and most enduring teacher throughout life. But we get overwhelmed. And so we're here as a resource that sometimes provides training. We provide support groups. We have wonderful things called member mixers where adults come and there's activities for children. So we were really excited when Balmer reached out to us in United Way. So we are saying to all of the partners that we work with, whether they're schools, faith-based organizations, and other colleagues, to say, hey, everyone, let's make sure that, one, we're letting parents know that we know through research that after-school programs make a better trajectory for your child emotionally, socially, and this is incredibly important after COVID. I mean, we got little people who's showing up in the second grade who've never been around other children. We have junior high and high school students who've just been itching to be able to sit down with mentors and grow together in a team environment. And those team environments are so important when you look at the future. So what we're doing is letting all of the families know that we interact with about this is an opportunity. Parents, don't sit, don't think, do it. We're also working with our partners in other schools. We're also saying to our schools and our after-school programs that, yes, we're doing things for kids, and that's important. But our position with DPN has always been that parents are the missing formula in so much of what we create. So we're looking forward and want to be a resource for some of the schools and some of the churches that are out there and say, hey, we're getting these parents and they're dropping their kids. So we don't want drive-by helicopter parents. Yeah. We want to get you in. And let's talk about what your needs are. Maybe you want to be able to increase your literacy. Maybe you want to be in a position to get some of these jobs that we see downtown and don't know how to connect to. Maybe you want to sit down with your child and do some literacy and learning in science and dance together. That's what we're trying to encourage and to be part of that. So you can tell we're excited because this is unprecedented in terms of the amount of funding that has come in to support an area that I think people are just better understanding now how important enrichment is for all kids. Especially summer enrichment. Mm-hmm. But my last question because we're right up against the time, my last question to you is just the importance of summer. Make sure your kids are maintaining that learning and that retention of information throughout the summer, so they're going into the fall better prepared.
Yeah, I think that's really important for parents to understand that, we don't live in a society that we did when the bell rang, we ran out of there and we were like happy to get away from school. Our children have been through COVID. They have had what was called a summer loss or a learning loss, but with COVID, it's been a tsunami of loss. And this is the opportunity is so critical. We know by looking at test scores, we know by talking to our children that they're behind. This is an opportunity in a fun, exciting environment to help them catch up and give parents the tools that they need to help their children catch up too.
Jametta Lilly is the CEO of Detroit Parent Network. Thank you so much for joining us on the Metro. If you're a parent and you're listening, head to summerdiscoverymi.org/summer site locations, and that'll get you to what you need to know for the summer and your kids. Thank you, Jametta, so much.
It's a joy being here. Thank you.
It is the Metro on 1019 WDET. That was Tia Graham. I am Nick Austin. And right now we transition a bit to the big news that's happening in November, right? It's the election year and all eyes are pointing towards who's going to win in this third face-off or this third attempt by Donald Trump to become president, this time, second time against Joe Biden. He's been the de facto leader of the Republican Party since winning in 2016, but even after losing in 2020, Trump still calls the shots and can torpedo legislation, much like he did with a bipartisan immigration reform bill earlier this year. But there are some conservatives that want Trump out of the GOP. In fact, according to the Wall Street Journal, the anti-Trump Republicans are more likely to have a college degree and live in the suburbs. They care more about the economy than immigration and foreign policy. The group Republican Voters Against Trump has $50 million, and it plans to spend that money on advertising in swing states like Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and right here in Michigan. Gunnar Raymer, who is with the group, told WDET's Russ McNamara the voters used in their ad campaign were deeply impacted by the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol.
These are former supporters that voted for him once, or they are two-time Trump supporters, and they understand that Donald Trump is a unique threat to our democracy. When you watch our testimonials, these voters realize just how dangerous January 6th was. To have a political party who does not respect the prospect of free and fair elections is absolutely harmful to our country. And that's why these voters are being courageous and brave and are willing to speak out, even if they identify as these traditional Republican Reaganist type voters against Donald Trump.
Was January 6th specifically the breaking point?
I think that when you have the 2016 Trump supporters, but they didn't vote for him in 2020, they may have voted for him in 16 because they wanted a businessman and an outsider, and they didn't particularly like Hillary Clinton. They didn't see Trump in office as beneficial to themselves, right? They didn't like the churn in his cabinet. They didn't like the chaos and division that he has created in our country. But I think that absolutely, when you talk to a two-time Trump supporter who can't support him in 2024 and are even making an affirmative case to vote for Joe Biden, a major reason for that is January 6th. And that's backward looking. And I think that our messaging strategy is twofold. One, it is backward looking. It's taking a strong stance against January 6th and all of the election denialism that Trump has instilled within the party, but it's also forward looking. It's this idea of retribution and revenge, of being a dictator on day one, of terminating the Constitution, that absolutely terrifies these voters. And that's why they are willing to stick their neck out and say, you know what? I can't support Donald Trump in 2024.
So how do anti-Trump conservatives take back control of the party? Is it just as simple as Trump losing this election cycle and maybe having him go away for good?
Yeah, it's a good question. I used to say that I am pessimistic in the short term for the health of the Republican Party, but I am optimistic. That's no longer the case. What is very clear is that a strong majority of the Republican Party likes the brand of politics that Donald Trump has brought upon. the Republican Party. But I think what anti-Trump Republicans who recognize the danger that Trump poses, is give the Republican Party sustained electoral defeat. And we have plenty of examples of this. In 2018, in midterms, it was a poor year for Republicans. In 2020, with Trump's campaign, it was a losing effort. In 2022, in a lot of winnable races. And we saw this play out in Michigan with Tudor Dixon. If you talk to swing voters in Michigan, they very much wanted to vote for a generic Republican. But when they learned about the extremism of someone like Tudor Dixon, they did not want to support that type of candidate, a candidate that reminded them of Donald Trump. And I think that we are going to see this same exact dynamic play out, that swing voters reject Donald Trump and the forces that he has unleashed on the party. And I just say to both Republican leaders and Republican primary voters that having Donald Trump as the central point of the Republican Party is a losing effort.
How much policy is in common between non-Trump conservative voters and Trump supporters, the things that he wants to do? Is this purely about personality and his election denialism?
Yeah, I think when you're talking about swing voters who are college-educated, suburban voters, they live outside of Detroit, they live outside of Grand Rapids, they may be okay with some of the policies that Donald Trump has put forward. They may be against even some of the policies that Joe Biden has made a central theme of his campaign. Understand, the most important part of our electoral system is our democracy. And Donald Trump is a unique threat to our democracy. And that's why they are so willing to go out. And again, it's these average, everyday, traditional Republican voters willing to be part of a campaign that speaks out against their own party. And voting is incredibly tribal. We've seen how partisan people have become. And yet they recognize just how dangerous Donald Trump is, that they are willing to go out and say, you know what, I'm not voting for Trump in 2024. And I think that it's an indictment as well on Republican leaders, people who were around for the first Trump administration, who may tell a reporter on background, who want to be part of a journalist's book that comes out, who maybe has military service, that's willing to say, you know what, maybe Trump isn't so great. And yet they aren't willing to go on the record and be public facing about just how dangerous Donald Trump is. And I think that it's a testament to our champions who are part of our grassroots support movement. But again, it's incredibly disappointing that those who know better don't speak out against Trump. And, you know, having Mike Pence saying he's willing to refuse endorsing Trump, I think is fantastic, because that shows that there is someone who is incredibly close to the first Trump administration saying, you know what, I can't get behind this time around.
Do you think it would take a conviction in a criminal court to help provide the political cover for some of the conservative leaders in this country to be able to say it's maybe time to move on?
Maybe. I don't know. I think that after January 6th, if you're a Republican who knows better and is not willing to speak out, that it's incredibly disappointing, right? You had supporters of former President Trump saying, hang Mike Pence, and yet they are not willing to speak out. So if Donald Trump becomes a convicted felon, I think that it does more with the swing voter who may have an unfavorable opinion of Biden and Trump. There is only some evidence that there are Republicans at the elite level willing to speak out against Trump, even though we know that there are much more who know better.
That was WDET's Russ McNamara speaking with Gunnar Raymer, who helps run Republican voters against Trump. I'm Nick Austin alongside Tia Graham, and coming up, we'll talk about a new event coming at 2, the College for Creative Studies, showcasing their senior graduates.
Welcome back to the Metro right here on 101.9 WDET FM. Partly sunny, a high of 60 degrees today. Right now it's 52 degrees, Nick.
That's right. And this weekend, I guess that might be decent enough weather for you to get over to the College of Creative Studies, who will be showcasing the senior thesis work of its students. The show's curator described it as a look at the intersections of identity, memory, and materiality, with a particular focus on the shifting narratives that shape contemporary culture. To learn more, we're joined by CCS's section lead of sculpture, Professor Cheeto Johnson. Professor Johnson, welcome to the Metro.
Thank you.
I'm happy to have you here. We want to get into the students' work as well as your work in terms of sculpture, but in looking at you right now, you seem to wear your background on your shirt because it says Detroit-Zimbabwe. Can you let us know a little bit about your background and how you even got into sculpture?
I was born and raised in Zimbabwe, and grew up actually connected to Detroit. I was raised in when during the early struggle for freedom for Zimbabwe, which Zimbabwe got independent in 1980, and there was a sense, as an artist, there was a sense of revolutionary, transformative creative force that was happening as people were trying to redefine cultural identity from a post-colonial state. And when I moved to Detroit, there was that same similar sense 20 years ago, where there was the same kind of energy, revolutionary and creative force that existed here.
Yeah.
So that's kind of really connected to me here. Yeah, so the t-shirt just happened to be wearing is it's kind of cool because we've been having these exchanges between Detroit and Zimbabwe and taking students down to Zimbabwe too.
All right. Well, that's cool. And, you mentioned sculpture. I'm struck by this intersection between social activism and art. It comes up very often. Your medium that you specialized in is sculpture. Why was sculpture the route that you took?
Well, for me, my father was a political cartoonist for Revolutionary Paper, painter, puppetry. So I got into puppetry and painting. But when I was 19, I studied with an amazing Zimbabwean artist, Magutsa, who was a stone sculptor. And suddenly my pieces were too heavy to become puppets that carved stone. But something was really beautiful was, we carved stone. We carved within a community, under a tree. Context of working together was a thing. And sculpture has that, where space and looking at space and looking at people become just as effective. The body becomes part of the space. And that's what connected me compared to other forms that more based on a gaze from a distance.
Yeah. Well, when you talk about art, it's a personal story for a lot of artists. If a student comes to the College for Creative Studies, how do you think it's best for you to help them explore their own art? Are you teaching them technically? Are you just helping them expose what they have within them? What's your role as a guide?
Well, we definitely start out with language, like where we call foundations, where the processes and certain kind of aesthetic traditions from different cultures. But having 54 years old. Having been an artist almost all my life and have a lot of experience, I'm still ignorant when I come to meet a student because they have been with themselves for about 17 years. So it becomes a learning experience, a shared experience where we have to kind of learn them as much as they're learning from us.
Yeah.
So
Go ahead.
Yeah. So that's it. So that negotiating, learning, and trying to see how best we can help them find the voice, not to perpetuate some kind of practice or system, but how can they create and transform new languages and new thoughts and new ideas.
Yeah, and one place that we'll be able to see that is the work of the seniors, who there's highlighting the senior thesis work with the More Than Today's Tomorrow group show that's happening over the course of this weekend. For those who are looking to attend, what can they expect to see and what disciplines are even there? I mean, is it just going to be all sculpture? Or what do you got?
I'm part of a department called Arts and Craft, which is the history of CCS. The history was built with the history of arts and craft. So it's really great to be part of this. And I'm part of an amazing colleague of people working together. And there's 21 artists in this exhibit. And it's actually not at CCS campus. It's at 333 Midland, which is a community space. And we have artists coming from blowing glass to painting, to video, jewelry. There's no process we don't touch. And it's such a diverse group of people, which I top my hat off to the curator of bringing these artists together and having this beautiful curated exhibit.
Yeah, glass blowing is very beautiful. You mentioned that. How often do you get a chance to see that? And the
very
art,
rare.
Right.
very rare. That's kind of rare about our school is that we have old and new technologies. Very few programs have glass blowing. Very few programs have stone carving. Very few programs have boundaries now. So we are definitely a very rare breed.
I even went online and saw that there was iron working that was happening, and you can get space.
And you'll
to do
see
that.
that.
You'll
see that. There's an artist, Alex, who's made his own system, and you'll be actually seeing it live.
Interesting. I've been thinking about getting an axe or a pike or something from the times of not really, Cheeto. I like that you're looking at being like no worries, Cheeto. I do want to mention the idea of the inner of identity, memory, something that informs work that you do or your students, and if so, how does it?
Well, as I am a team, there's two other faculties in this class with me, and so this conversation don't exist solely with me, with the students. It exists with we're a village there. So a whole group of artists that influence the young artists as well. But this is something, intersections we're dealing with. And this group of students, I think, these generations are really confronting questions that maybe some of us were afraid to confront. And I think it's what the curator found, the narrative between it is how do two people converse, trying to find new words and new language to discuss something. Because we use the same languages, it's like perpetuating the same conversations. Yeah. So I think materiality becomes a way to do that. And I think they're doing it.
All right. Well, before I let you go, I do have to ask you, because Detroit is such a thriving arts community, but I also know there are others who might not be as familiar with the art space here. Maybe they have a loved one who likes art, but they haven't necessarily had that background, a little scared of dipping their toe in, or just want to take a shot at learning something. Do you have any tips or ideas for those folks?
And before I do that, I'd shout out to one other exhibit.
Please.
So this opening on the 19th we're talking about, there's another show on the 20th at Herman Kiefer. Coding Taking Care, which is curated by Manal Shokol and also includes the seniors. And this is where artists are exploring space, not objects. And I think that's really cool. It's used to be an old hospital, so it's to people coming to a hospital and seeing work inside an empty space. Yeah. But going back to how do you...
I'm going to have to end it right there, though, Professor Johnson. Unfortunately, running short on time means we'll have to have you back. But Professor Johnson with CCS, thanks for joining us on the Metro.
Cool.
It's the Metro on 101.9 WDET. I am Nick Austin alongside Tia Graham.
I am here alongside Nick Austin. Great conversation we just heard. On Wednesday night, though, Mayor Mike Duggan gave his 11th State of the City address. In it, he tried to demonstrate the ways that the city has improved over the last decade since coming out of bankruptcy. So, how well is Detroit doing? And what direction is Mayor Duggan attempting to push the city? Yesterday, we spoke with the Director of Neighborhoods, Ray Solomon, which was a really great conversation to get his perspective. Now, we want to have a broader conversation about Mayor Duggan's address. To discuss it, we have Malachi Barrett here. He is a reporter for Bridge Detroit, a friend of the show. Malachi, welcome back to the Metro.
Hey, happy Friday.
Happy Friday, TGIF. Mayor Duggan, he said that America is no longer ignoring Detroit. What evidence does he have with that being no longer true?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of this speech was the mayor looking back at the last decade of his leadership and, celebrating a lot of the strides taken and some of the culmination of things that he had envisioned a long time ago, particularly blight cleanup and repurposing vacant sites. All eyes are going to be on the city next week for the NFL draft, and he was very top of mind talking about how, sites like Fisher Body Plant and, turned into productive use. And he's pretty far from being mayor of the city.
So, Malachi, when you're out and about, when you're chatting with community residents, community groups at meetings, and you're around town, what are some of the biggest issues that you're hearing from them, and what do they care most about? And are any of those things not being prioritized by the city?
Yeah, I mean, I think people are happy, I guess, to see, some of the rebounding of the downtown and the city being put in a place where it can host the NFL draft. But people are also really focused on that investment coming outside, that small area of the city and into the neighborhoods. And the mayor's, cognizant of that as well. He's talked a lot about how the fate of the city is tied to its neighborhoods. Every neighborhood has a future, kind of taglines from past campaigns. Ran for office, he mocked different address was at a Israeli target, repurposing a center there. They've invested structure. I think people will just want to see more of that, right? I mean, they want to see the quality of life in their neighborhoods improve. People are happy if you're a homeowner that Property values have nearly doubled in the last decade. It's a $3 billion gain for Black wealth in the city. Of course, we're about 50% renter now as well. So affordability is always an issue that people are talking about. And as we see these developments and these investments, is it putting any kind of strain on the rent that people are paying? And, how is this being done equitably? I mostly just hear a lot of people hoping that some of these investments come their way and need to feel kind of connected to the city's planning processes.
Which is, interesting. We had the conversation about a lot of the work that's being done throughout the neighborhood. What improvements have you seen, or have heard about since we've?
Yeah, at that point, mayor government, 2 presidential administrations, Obama and now Biden, to get federal funds, and then voters passed Proposal N, which unlocked a lot more funding to demolish homes and transfer property to the land bank, and hopefully people get an opportunity. Residents in their neighborhoods get an opportunity to buy back that land that's owned by the land bank. I think a lot of it kind of comes down to issues on the block, which is why the mayor also is now prioritizing enforcement of abandoned vehicles. They hired more code enforcement officers to go out and remove cars that are parked in people's lawns and, abandoned on city streets. And he really flagged this issue of like semi-trucks and commercial vehicles being kind of stored in residential areas as a common, eyesore that people have had and felt like it's a problem. Hasn't gotten as much blighted buildings. Has obviously also tried to balance that down in the 30s. But I think Mo campaign is like the clearest example of that blight cleanup effort, which is really multifaceted, right? But, we're getting toward the end of that now after about a decade of pretty aggressive demolition. And so I'm curious to see kind of what does that look like in its next stage. The land bank is kind of getting through its inventory. The city's knocking down its list of homes to knock down.
And, this is one of my last questions before we let you go. We're up on time. Mayor Duggan, a lot of people have been saying on social media, just in talk in general, Mayor Duggan plans to run for governor. Do you know anything about this? And do you know what kind of candidate he'd be like if he did run for governor of the state?
Yeah, I think his pitch would be pretty similar to what we saw on Wednesday. There's a lot of speculation about whether he'll run. He said he's going to have to take a little bit more time before sharing his future plans. I think we might hear more about that this summer, but Democratic politicos I talked to say he'll probably take a shot at it. And I think it makes sense for him to define his legacy and accomplishments to hang his kind of reputation on and start making that case statewide. And, that pitch will probably be, the mayor came in, bankruptcy recovery, things are going good. And, this speech is kind of a preview of what that message might look like.
Malachi Barrett, reporter for Bridge Detroit. Malachi, as always, thank you so much for joining us on the Metro and explaining city government to people like me who need to know more. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Tia. Good to hear from you.
Awesome. This is the Metro. Coming up, we'll talk about why Americans generally don't prioritize their vote on changing gun control laws.
On 1019 WDET, where I'm Nick Austin alongside Tia Graham. And gun violence is a big problem right now in the United States, with studies showing the widespread availability of guns leads to more homicides and suicides. While Americans say they are concerned about gun control, it doesn't generally translate to their voting priorities. NPR's Michelle Martin spoke with Rutgers Professor Ashley Koenig about voting behavior and as it relates to the issue of gun violence.
So is it accurate that the issue of gun violence doesn't seem to compel voters in the same way as other issues like, for example, the economy or abortion? And if that is true, why is that?
The unfortunate part is when we're looking at the most important problem or what voters or Americans tell us is most important to their vote, gun control, gun safety usually doesn't make the list. It may be masked by something like crime or violence. But when we look at recent polling from Pew, Gallup, and other national organizations, we see that, of course, it's the economy that's topping most important issues within the country, as well as things like immigration and terrorism and inflation and cost of living. We really don't see guns and firearms break through unless we're talking to younger voters.
There are a lot of kind of myths around voting behavior that, we sort of pass on from generation to generation that may or may not be true. One of those kind of received wisdoms is that the issue of gun policy drives Republicans and / conservative voters to the polls, or has, in ways that the issue of gun safety has not necessarily driven Democrats / progressives to the polls. Is that true?
I would say that it's not necessarily a myth, because what we see in public opinion doesn't necessarily always match up with what voters are doing in real life. And so we do see, of course, large support for gun safety measures among Democrats, but it may not be the top issue that they're necessarily voting on, or that's necessarily getting them to the voting booth. We do see that that has been more successful with Republican voters, but I would say potentially within these past few election cycles, those kinds of strategies might be changing.
Interesting. In which way?
We see gun control kind of having the potential of what we've seen abortion do within the past couple of election cycles, with Democrats may be able to utilize that. But also we have to realize, weighing against the entire issue of the economy, how prevalent that is in voters' minds. And so they may support gun control, they may support gun control measures, but that may be not what's driving them to the voting booth.
We've been reporting over the last couple of weeks about gun violence. One of the things that struck us in our reporting was we talked to a lot of people who have been affected by gun violence. And when we asked them if it was going to affect how they voted, most of them didn't really think that politics was the solution. They were thinking more about community groups that had helped them. And I was just struck by that. What do you think that means?
Yeah, I mean, that's fascinating. And I think that harkens back to gun violence is something that should not be a political issue, but unfortunately it very much is. And it has been incredibly politicized over the decades. And since we have seen so little movement in Congress and in administration after administration on gun violence, it may be something that voters, frankly, don't think can be solved in that manner.
What does it take, or do we have any sense of circumstances under which this issue would move up or down under people's list of priorities?
We have seen so many tragic events that we think would have been the catalyst for something like that. And nothing has really seemed to, in the end, eventually really charge up voters and policymakers alike. And so, it's hard to vote on it when it's not on the radar of voters and it's something that policymakers won't touch.
That was NPR's Michelle Martin speaking with Professor Ashley Koenig about gun violence and voting preferences in America.
We got about 10 seconds, Nick. The Detroit Lions uniforms.
Boo, don't like them.
That it was about 10 seconds. No, I was going to say that wasn't even 10 seconds.
Hey, give me back the blue and gray. You see the Seahawks jersey I'm wearing right now? Beautiful. No white in it anywhere. Blue and silver. Love it.
That's all I wanted for I just wanted the listeners to hear that. Just wanted the listeners to hear what you've been talking about all morning. That's the Metro for Friday, April 19th. You can listen to recent episodes online at WDET.org and make sure to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform.
The show is produced Sam Corey, David Lyons, Jack Philbrandt. Our engineer is Nate Bender.
The Metro is a production of WDET, a listener-supported service of Wayne State University. If you like what you hear and want to support the Metro, consider becoming a member at WDET.org/donate.
This is WDET-FM, Detroit Public Radio, your connection to news, music, and conversation. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you on Monday.
Monday.